Welcome to the Activate CX podcast as we demystify and clarify the direction of CX. My name is Frank Rogers, and I'm your host. I help brands grow with better CX, AI, and self-service. So today we look at AI through the lens of Sprinklr with special guest Jay Vigeland. Let's go. You really soak in the AI tub on the daily.
World's moving pretty fast, and in the AI space, we are absolutely experiencing that. If you even follow anything on social media or any threads that you happen to enjoy, it's almost daily now where we see massive updates. And I think where we're in a very enviable position is that we've kind of been at the forefront of it for a long time. So this is not something new for us. We watch it and we're trying to capture the best components of it as we apply it to not just our software in general, but particularly the contact center space.
Yeah, there's this curve, right? The adoption curve, and it's almost like a bell curve, although it kind of skews a little bit to the right. But a little bit to the right, there's a center point, and at that center point, you have two groups of people: late adopters and laggards. And I really want to congratulate the person that came up with that latter phrase, laggards, because it really is a slap in the face for people that are too late to the party. But there is a sense that this is a normal adoption curve, that there are people that have just as much excitement about the subject of AI in the contact center, with the amount of people that have they're petrified of the change. They're, in fact, more than petrified, they're paralyzed by the change.
Right.
So what are your thoughts on that as you're working with people and you're getting them to adopt omnichannel and look at other components of the contact center, then the subject of AI comes up? How do you negotiate that conversation?
Well, you know what AI stands for a lot of people, right, Frank?
No, break it down.
Awful idea. It really is. A lot of people are you said it correctly. They're petrified. They're not sure what to do. And then I think one of the things that we see a lot is there's so much adoption of it in the consumer space, or in just kind of the, hey, go try it out and it's free and you can check it out, or it's $9 and whatever it is, cost and those things being aside, it's not easy. So those are cool bells and whistles and things like that. But we find that, especially if you're talking about communicating with people about your brand, about your products, etc., you can't go just do something fly by night and fun, right? It has to have some rigor to it. Mm-hmm. So I think, one of the ways that I like to kind of couch that is by talking about the scope of how many people we have working on it. So, for example, AI in itself is not verticalized. It's not even trained in different languages. You have to do that. We have 200 people or more, 200 more people that all they do is train our AI, our specific AI, in native language. So, it's trap number one, if I were to say it, which is, hey, you're talking about AI, are you talking about English, Spanish, Chinese? Like, what language do you want to start with? Because if your customers are wanting to speak not only with you on different channels, whether it be WhatsApp or whether it be voice or whether it be chat or through a bot, that's just the channels. Then you talk about the languages in those channels. And so if you're going to take this on yourself, or you're going to train them, you can train in languages, you can train to understand your company. And one of the things that we find, competitively speaking, is that there are a lot of providers out there that will come in and say, we will train your model for you, give us 12 months, and we'll have it tied up. Even if you said 6 months, it's a long time out. And so one of our approaches has been, and the reason why we've been doing it for so long, is that we come kind of more pre-built. And then we'll get into the discussion about large language model adoption as well. But I think this awful idea, or artificial intelligence, conundrum for people, I think making sure you know what you're getting into if you're trying to take it on yourself. And it's just probably not something that pans out. I think you can do the little fun stuff and little, log in and have a funny query or whatever. But when you're talking about your brand and your business, you better really understand what you're getting into. And hopefully we can talk a little bit about those risks and rewards.
It is complicated, and it does take a while to deploy. But if you think about like this adoption curve again, and you have this group of late adopters and laggards, on the other side, there are these early adopters, and those people can be your competition. So I think that there is a real palpable reason for investigating, starting to experiment with, getting involved with AI, because it is really your competitive advantage. Isn't that not what you think as well?
I totally agree. And, to that case, we have north of 50, 60 customers that we've talked publicly about that are utilizing this in the wild. They are the early adopters within our early adopter environment, right? And the results so far have been very demonstrable and exciting. And this is the combination, not just what Sprinklr has been doing all these years on the AI front, but is now the interaction between, call it Sprinklr AI and our AI Plus offering, which ties it into the large language models that are being offered out there. And just to make things more confusing, Frank, there's more than one, right? There's OpenAI, there's Azure OpenAI, there's Google Vertex, there's AWS Bedrock. These are all the different providers out there. Meta has one now as well that are business focused, right? So when we talk about Google Vertex, it's not Bard, right? It's different. Right. So even within the large language models, they have kind of a public and a private side. And for each of those, you start to dial in topics like security and privacy and other things that come along that we are very in tune with, as the customers we have are the world's largest brands. And the last thing you want to do is connect them up to a query response system, if you will, right? A bot that comes back and says the wrong stuff.
So for each one of these services, Jay, like, is that something that you look at and decide based upon a customer's user story and requirement that you're going to use one over the other, or do you use predominantly one more than the other?
So we're adding to the library, right, if you will. So we've publicly stated that we use Azure OpenAI as well as OpenAI, and then we announced Google Vertex. So we really have three in the mix, and then we're developing to the others that I mentioned. Specific timelines, but we're able to do it very quickly. For us, it continues kind of the approach that the customer may have different preferences, right? And there's different ins and outs of each one of these large language model providers, both from a security perspective. There's slight differences, but there's also just preferences that our customers have. And if we're going to provide them access to these systems, we want them to be able to choose, right? And so I think that's, for us, being able to add and offer multiple, engines, if you will. But I think even more core to that is that the underlying capabilities that we have, that we've developed over the years, both from a vertical perspective, from a language perspective, I would really view them as our guardrails for that security and privacy, et cetera. So I'll give you an example.
Sure.
If you are in a customer service environment, and whether it's a bot or whether it's a human being assisted by our technology, one of the things that you want to take into account when you ask for a response from a large language model, a GPT-ish type of provider, is you want to give it context, and you also want to have it understand what the tone is. Because if I'm interacting with you, I'm the customer or your prospect, and I'm already frustrated maybe with something that I've purchased. You don't want a snarky response. But how does the large language model know that you really should tone it down and be super nice, right? We're the ones that Sprinkr is the engine that is providing that guidance. So when we send in a query, if you will, or a question that we expect a response to, we give it guardrails, not just in terms of language, but in terms of tone, in terms of sentiment. And our ability to do that is very unique, right? We're very, very good at and well known for, understanding the context, the tone, et cetera. That's how we built our models up, by being connected to all these social channels, right? Our listening platform has trained and tuned us to understand these verticals these languages, and then the sentiment of the message itself. So very simply put, we're sending not just the question, but the question with the context and with even idea of tone and sentiment, so that the large language model has its best opportunity to provide a perfect response. And
Yeah, that's
that's
awesome.
very different than just plugging into one and sending it a bunch of queries, right?
Yeah, so you're damping down the risk of that. But if we look at the rate of change, and for those people that are looking at cost, obviously there's ROI involved with AI, but just from a cost perspective, my guess is that cost is not necessarily going to go up too much or down too much. I mean, there's a cost rate of managing AI,
Right.
the process of it and the transaction of it. But isn't there really kind of an opportunity cost that's sitting out there as well? Like for those people that are sitting and waiting, they're missing this time period of non-adoption, of getting in front of their customers and meeting them where they are in a way that the rest of the world is evolving to, and they are starting to be in a gap with what is expected.
It is, there is a sense of urgency, I think, for a lot of the customers that we see, even in particular verticals. I'll just anecdotally, I will tell you, like, we
Yeah.
have a lot of traction lately with airlines. Why? Because there's just a ratcheted up demand for a faster, better way to communicate and collaborate. And those are not on voice channels traditionally, right? I mean,
Yes.
or they have been, but that's not where people want to go and hang out for 47 minutes. Or I, no joke, had one the other day. I won't name the airline to respect them, but it was 7 hours. I was told 7 hours. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like unbelievable, right? It's just, especially when your flight's like in two, right?
Yes.
So I think the urgency and the scale, and I think one thing that's lost is it's not just about satisfying the demand. It's also about meeting that demand of your consumers and your prospects or the customers or whoever citizens at a very high level, at a very satisfactory engagement level in terms of their experience, right? CX, Activate CX podcast, right? It
Right.
really is about that experience. And I think one thing that we hold our hat up pretty high is that um, we are finding that the CSAT scores are higher with our digital channels than even some people's best contact center people, humans. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that the humans are going away. It's not some big threat to that, but rather it's an opportunity to refocus human resources, improve them, advance them. And one thing I'd like to maybe talk a little bit about is just the agents themselves, right? We're talking about the brand and the customers, but what about making the agent's life better? Turnover in the customer service space is still brutally high. And if you've ever done a job like that, it's it's really quite can be quite painful, right? Not only from a ramping perspective, but just the satisfaction perspective. And one of the metrics that we've been capturing is that we will see that the agents are, their happiness scale is improving using these assisting technologies within Sprinklr, because they don't have the discomfort of not knowing what to say or having the resource at their fingertips, but rather we're bringing that right to them in the context of the conversation. So the way we're doing that is we're listening to the entire dialogue going back and forth between the agent and the customer or the prospect or whomever it may be. And then we are serving up in real time. Our AI in real time is understanding the context of it and trying to assist that agent, either with suggestions on what to say, workflows to trigger for maybe going through a change in a credit card number or some form of authentication. And it's no longer, you've been in the contact center world, it's no longer the screen with 17 tabs open. They just are able to stay local, focused, and have a caring dialogue with the customer. And so when we see that the user is happier, they're probably going to be providing better customer service at the same time.
So Jay, from the standpoint of iteration, what's driving the iteration AI right now technically? Like if we look at evolution and the Ferris Bueller's life goes by pretty fast, what's going by pretty quickly right now?
I think it is the readiness of these large language models to be applied in different areas, right? So it isn't just a trial. It isn't just a little test of, oh, here's some cool stuff. The breadth and depth of these large language models is really astounding. I think the other thing is that these providers, whether it's Microsoft or OpenAI or Google or AWS, they are also curious to see the applicability of their technology in different areas. So while we're talking about the contact center space, obviously we've applied this to the entire platform. And really our goal is to have it be pervasive, regardless if you're a marketer or a research person or using our insights product or in the contact center, that it just feels natural, right? That it's just an extension of the platform itself, as opposed to imagine somebody saying, let me copy and paste that comment, go into another window, paste it, and So I think one of the things that's been cool, I'll say, share a quick anecdote with one of these providers. I won't identify who, but one of the providers, we had an initial meeting, we had a follow-up meeting 2 weeks later, and they brought their entire technical team on to help us to discuss like how to integrate it. And our engineering team just went into a demo showing them how we were already using it. 2 weeks, right? To fully embed their technology. And they were just absolutely blown away, right? And I think that's the pace of innovation has to be both from the large language provider, from a vendor or ISV like ourselves, and then figuring out how to make it work within the platform. And we're in a very unique space, I think, from that perspective. Like I said, in the wild with 50 plus customers, really hammering and utilizing this across our platform is really good.
Is the pace of organizational change inside of businesses keeping pace with the change in AI?
No, we're getting there. I think we see this even at a more what you would consider simplistic. We're talking about advanced use cases and things like that, and how to adopt these technologies. And we work with our partner community, right? They are working very closely with us, and they tend to be the ones that will have that transformational discussion, right? We are a technology provider, but if you want to transform your org, sometimes it's even like, what does the resume look like for the person I need to hire to be able to manage this project, right? Because it's all net new. They don't even have the concept of what we discussed last time with being channel-less, right? Or being able to add more and more of these technologies. So I think the success of our platform or of our capabilities, et cetera, to me are described when it's self-evident how to use it. That it just becomes like just an appendage. It's something you're used to. It's just, you know how to use it. It's very self-evident from a capabilities perspective, and you trust it.
So you speak about trust, and obviously that trust is something that we're talking about. One, both the organization trusts that the AI is going to deliver on their brand promise, but then also the customers are trusting in the promise with AI and with that brand. So where do you see the trend going right now in terms of customer preference? Are they preferring more of the chatbot, or are they preferring more of the voice bot? Is there data that's starting to show that people are gravitating towards one over the other?
So because the CSAT measurements are proving themselves out to be very high when utilizing our tech on the bot side, there is expanded adoption, and we see customers, because we work with large global organizations. So we may land in a particular business unit, right, that has a particular set of products, or it could be cosmetics, and there's just lots of different use cases there. But I think the rate of expansion, when you see it on the street called like net dollar expansion, but the rate of expansion on utilization of our tech is accelerating. And I think it's because we are measuring the success and seeing it. It's demonstrable. The trust side comes, by the way, when we talk about large language models. The trust is on not just the delivery of the right response, but the trust model is also wanting to make sure that our intellectual property, not Sprinklr's, but the customer's intellectual property, is not being sacrificed or leaked either. And so, when there's, I think we talked about it last time, there was some pretty sad stories of people uploading engineering documentations, and it goes to the public realm, right?
That's
So
right.
all the large language models that we use are on the private side, for one. And then you start to have these dialogues with with our customers' technology team and privacy team and legal team. How long is the question stored? Do you provide our company information and name when you submit the query? And so those are where we start to have a deeper dive about the content that we send across, about the frequency of amnesia that the large language model has when it receives a query, right? Does it hold on to it for a millisecond? Does it store it for a week? And different large language model providers have different terms of service of how they use the content and the insight. So these are very, very in-depth conversations when you know what the end result is that you want, but then you also have to go through the journey of ensuring that you understand the implications of the queries that you're making and those responses at the technical, legal, finance level.
Yeah. And those are sometimes where the rubber meets the road. From the standpoint of, as we're looking at self-service, but we're talking about AI in particular, the ROI is obviously great, but a lot of times the ROI is assessed within the context of how many people are you going to let go inside the business, right? Like in terms of a cost offset. But there are probably other attributes as well that if you're not letting go of people, or you're not reapportioning them to another part of the business, which is, a legitimate, labor arbitrage technique to put people into new positions, whether it be in sales or in professional services or business development. But regardless, there are things outside of the human component that are attributes. What are the things that you look at specifically inside the business when people are trying to make the case to drive out AI?
So there's no question that the human resource arbitrage conversation can be part of the component and the consideration, whether that means elimination of growth in new additive roles or reduction in the existing. So that's naturally part of it. But some of the measurements, and you said it well, like of retasking or repositioning that person, or looking even at the model itself, the customer service ecosystem itself, a little bit differently, which is usually where we start to try and drive some of the potential uplift for your business and ROI, which is, if you knew that 30% of your phone calls were actually upsell opportunities in the contact center space that you never tapped into because you just didn't know what was happening there other than a couple measurements about success, what would you do? Well, you might actually hire some inside salespeople to take the handoff from the customer service team. And now you're actually doing outbound customer service calls that are turning into a sales call. So you arguably, you might be reducing a force within a contact center, but you might be actually hiring then in your sales related roles. And if you can start to have that dialogue about your call center being a profit center, that's a completely different discussion as well. And I think we have partners in the BPO space, right, business process outsourcing space, whose models traditionally have been around headcount, right? Sometimes call volume or case volume, but also just a model about outsourcing headcount. And now that has to change as well, right? So I think we've had some very unique and interesting conversations as that space continues to evolve. So it's not just the businesses, but it's the businesses running other people's businesses that are all going to be impacted and hopefully elevated, right, to new opportunities of value that they can deliver and espouse in their market.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's more of a nuanced conversation, and certainly it requires kind of not only the analytics behind it, but a little bit of reorganizing your business. But it's easy to recognize that it's presenting tons of opportunity versus downsides inside the organization. And I think there's a direct relationship for sure between what's happening on the self-service side and what AI is providing, and how is providing incredible experience for the agent, and especially the agents that are now in a position where they're maybe dealing with the more complex issues that they've ever dealt with before, because that's their new role.
I think I really, the way I enjoy thinking about it is opportunity for net new scenarios to happen, right? Where I remember speaking to a CEO of a very large organization here in the States, and I asked him, he's a Sprinklr customer, really enjoys the product on the marketing and insight side. And I asked him, what he thought about his contact center. And his response was a little bit cheeky, but it's like, I know we have one. I know they have good metrics, and I know they have good results, and they do what they're supposed to do. I'm like, how much insight are you getting out of them? And so now you have this conversation where, like, well, because of AI and because of all these processing and compute capabilities we have to be able to transcribe, a conversation, this conversation in real time, if we wanted, the even thought that there could be new product ideas, new marketing ideas, feedback on the campaign that you just launched yesterday, and people are talking about it in the contact center, the CMO would love to know about that, right?
That's right.
And so as you start to have these dialogues and unlock the insights, it's a great opportunity for people that are in an organization to even expand either their role or their network within that organization, or perhaps even developing a new role for themselves, right? In terms of having pervasive insights across multiple different orgs in your company. And I think, that data sharing means speed. We're doing some fascinating things on the insight side where, I'm not a data analyst, by the way, right? not even super close, but it's one of those things, like, I stayed at a Holiday Inn last night, right? And so like I all of a sudden I'm an expert, but it feels that way sometimes in our platform, where you can query, what type of insights should I be gleaning from this dashboard? And it'll tell you. It'll just come back with a response, right? So I think there's these things where the time scales are all shortening. So if I used to have a platform that would derive insights, and I'd have to go to a data analytics team or a data analysis team, and they would come back to me and try and talk to me in normal speak and explain to me what to action. Now we're seeing that happen literally in real time at any time, without necessarily needing to be that expert. So I think those are the things that are going to be very interesting to watch as well, where you can be more empowered to move faster. If I have the ability to distill petabytes of data instantaneously on my organization, that might come up with a new product idea that we can start to build tomorrow. Like, that used to take years. Now we can have that dialogue daily if wanted, right?
Yeah, well said. I mean, that's really the whole genesis of our Activate CX services program. So, I mean, our podcast is Activate CX, but we actually have a framework which is about how do you get from point A to point B. And my initial, drive into this world was through Deloitte, and then out of that primordial swamp, I was thrust into a lot of change mechanics, merger acquisitions, company turnarounds, company dissolutions, I mean, huge business transformation. My sense is we're sitting more globally on the cusp of that. We're looking at this as being this big, huge technological change, but it's more than that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that maybe that becomes the new pursuit, right? Is like, how can we unsilo your organization the fastest? And if you can do that at scale, and these companies, again, that we work with are at just crazy scale. You talk about the number of countries they operate in, or the SKUs that they do, or if they're in banking or finance, the number of generations that they touch in terms of their customers, right? Being able to move more adeptly as an overall organization to service those customers and realize that it's not inside the contact center anymore.
Yes,
I think is really going to be key. And you mentioned CMO, CRO, CIO, but there's also heads of product, right? And product innovation and development. And I think, there's no question we've seen it, but there's no question in my mind that not only can you stop negative products from, driving a customer service issue for you, whether it's a flickering screen on the laptop that you can identify and quantify how big an issue this might be for you, but also that people are constantly suggesting to you how to make your product better. And they're telling the quote unquote historically wrong people. They've been, barking at a customer service agent who's just trying to give them the right answer. And there's all these great, great ideas that your customers are providing to you. And so I think CMO, yes. CRO, yes. Heads of product and competitive intel, I think, are also just massive, 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 recipients of this insight. Should you break down the silos of your orgs and share this insight and data?
It's a great point. I love that you made that one. I missed that one on my roll going through the C-level suite, and you hit it right. Great pickup.
Yeah. Well, we're probably missing two others that we haven't thought of. Like, there's probably some warehousing person that would love to understand that the packaging doesn't need to be so big.
We apologize in advance.
There's some.
Completely. Jay, thanks for today. As always, we have a brilliant conversation, and I love your wisdom and your know-how, and thanks for being here, making the show complete.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Yep. So there you have it. I'm going to let you arrive at your own conclusions. There's really no reason to summarize this up. There are probably a couple of important points that it perfectly makes sense to get moving forward on AI and incorporating that in. And it's a process. The second part is every single day, the challenges and the risk of this is being damped down considerably. So just think of that as also part of the iterative rate of change. If you want to be successful, let us help you go get it. Activate CX with a trusted advisor today. If you like this podcast and you want to follow it, please crush the link down below, like and subscribe. We're also on Apple Podcasts as well. I think you might like that. And we've got some cool things on TikTok. Regardless, we're here to kind of up the game about CX, AI, self-service. And we also have a way to help you get there from point A to point B. And we have the relationships with all the right people. Case in point, Jay from Sprinklr and others, but we really love that company and we love the people there as well. I think that's a part of the equation that's important outside of competency in a product that delivers. So thank you very much. Have a great day.